Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk and tell a little story. My father passed away on October the 17th, uh, 2021, just a few weeks ago. He lived a full life, but he wasn't ready to go, and he caught COVID. And unfortunately, with COVID, it's very difficult to fight. And he lost his battle. It was my honor to be at the funeral, to bid my father an adieu, and all of the memories and history of all the years in which I knew him came to the forefront. And indeed, the story of how I found my father, lost my father, and found him again came into the forefront. And I wanted to share that with you because I think it's a fascinating story. And I really haven't talked about it because it was something I never wanted to talk about or to share because I didn't want anything to be said that was wrong or incorrect. And so I want to tell you a somewhat quick story. Not too quick. It's a Reader's Digest version of me and my father's history. I was born from a union of two people who never should have been together. But the reason they were together were because of two old biddies, the individuals who had become my grandmothers. Both of them worked for the Jersey City Bus Company. And they both discovered in their conversations that they had a child that was of marrying age. Grandma Stanley wanted to get rid of her son, who was a problem. And Grandma Rothmeyer, the step-grandmother of my mother, hated her daughter and was very happy to get rid of her. And so the two old biddies worked out a plan. Now, the interesting thing was that both of the old biddies, each one thought the other had money. And when they discovered that neither did, they would hate each other for eternity. But my father was in the Navy. While he was in the Navy, he discovered he got engaged. In fact, the grandmothers bought the engagement ring to give to my mother. And then my father came back from a tour on the USS Wasp and discovered he was getting married. And as he said to me, he said, I was 22. My hormones were aging and she was cute. And that was everything that got the whole thing started. Two people could not be more different. And cracks started to form in that relationship pretty much from the beginning. That became absolute fissures by the mid-1960s. And by the end of the 1960s, it had become totally unrepairable. And my parents separated. We went through a really bad period of time in which my mother remarried and married drunks and other people. Anyone to keep things going, as it were. But I lost sight of my father. And I did see him once in 1973, in which he kind of ran up to me, sat and talked to me for a moment, and handed me a $10 bill or a $20 bill, I don't remember. Said, share it with your sister, which I did. which caused a lot of problems at home too, as well. But that's another story altogether. That was the last time I saw my father, and that cameo appearance. So I went from being a boy in my teens to a man in my 20s, to a man in my 30s, to a man in my 40s, to a man in my 50s. And at that time, Jason said to me, I'm tired of hearing about you wondering what happened to your dad or your family, what became of them. And so he ordered all kinds of detective software and this, that, and everything. And he spent 3 days basically discovering if my family was around, or if my father was alive, or anyone in that family. And I didn't know he was doing this. And I got a call from him one day, and he said, I found your father. Wow. You have to understand the absolute amazement of that. And he got a hold of my half-brother, and then spent a lot of time talking to my half-sister, who I just call my brother and my sister at this point. And then in conversation, they set everything up. I was given the phone number to call, and I made it. And the first time I talked to my dad was October the 17th, 2010. It had been nearly 40 years. What does one say? What does one do? And so I nervously dialed the phone and listened to it ring. And a man picked up the phone and said, hello. And I said, Dad? And he said, yeah. That was an amazing moment. It's still, to this day, I think of that. And I break down. But after nearly 40 years, I talked to my father. And being that I deal with history, and I am fascinated by history, and I want to understand histories, the one history I didn't understand was my own. There were so many holes in the story of my life. And when I finally got to know my dad, I learned so much about my family, my forebears, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents. And I learned about my history. It was great. And perhaps the greatest gift of all was to find my father. And I talked to him like I was 12 years old when I talked to him, because that was really the last time I really sat and had conversations with him. And so, for nearly 11 years, that gift was given me. And I sat and talked to my father quite often. And I learned about myself. I learned about him. I learned who he was, because I didn't know anything about him. All I knew was things did not work right, and my mother was very upset. And I understand that, because there was a separation, and we were basically made homeless, which was a really unfortunate situation. The thing that's most amazing is that my father not only came back into my life, but became more than that. He became my friend. And I got to know my stepmother and my brother and my sisters. And the odd thing of all of this, the first time I talked to my dad after all those years was October the 17th, 2010. I talked to him on September 30th, 2021. We had a nice conversation. And on my birthday, October the 3rd, I got a message from my stepmom that my father was in the hospital and he had COVID. And a day or two after that, I talked to him again. We had a quick conversation, ending with, "I'll talk to you later and I love you." And he said, "I love you too." Never talked to him again because he would die, oddly, on October the 17th, 2021. To the day. To the very day that I rediscovered him 11 years. There's such an amazing thing about that. And so I was in Florida to bid my father an adieu. It's hard to lose your dad twice. And every moment of the later years meant an awful lot to me. I didn't have to be there. I didn't have to see him, but I knew he was there. And that was an important thing. And so now this is November the 1st I'm speaking. Just 2 weeks ago, he passed away. I was there with my brother and my sisters, and we were the honorary pallbearers for my father, who was in the Navy, of course, and served in the Korean War. There's lots of things I want to talk about him. But it's an interesting thing for me that I had that gift, that wonderful gift of rediscovering my dad, learning about him, learning about my family, learning about his family, and learning about who I was. Lots of people don't get that chance, but I did. And I am very, very thankful for it. And so as my father passed from the scene, there was a great deal of pain because I had lost him once before. And the second time was all the more painful. But as I said, I'm lucky. And it's a fascinating story. You don't hear these stories very often, and very few people get this opportunity. And there's everybody involved, from my father, my stepmother, my brother, my sisters. We all say, "Thank you, Jason," because he's the one that made it happen. And that's my story. Thank you.